Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Dave Bailey, and this is Grief and Grace, where we're talking about grief in the middle of a world and a reality that none of us have ever experienced before. And I apologize for the difference in camera quality. All of a sudden, all week long the camera's been perfect. All day long the camera's been perfect. I decided I'd reboot my computer before we started to make sure that everything was fine. And on the reboot, it can't find the other camera, the main camera that's over here that we typically use. So we're on the webcam, which is not nearly the same, quality, but here we go. All right. Thank you for joining us. This pandemic has physically and socially isolated people, and there's an overwhelming awareness of loss and of grief. You've probably been reading the papers and following the news just like I have. You know that the death toll in the U.S. from COVID-19 is in excess of 106,000. More than 41 million people have applied for unemployment. And this week, our nation has been in flames as the collective anger of people who have experienced far too long the effects of racism and inequality. That rage has boiled over. And there's a bone-deep grief in all of us that constricts our chest and gets caught in our throats and overwhelms our minds. We grieve the senseless obscenity of the death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. The list tragically goes on and on. We grieve the violence and the loss. We grieve for what's happening in our cities and for the people who are unwittingly and unwillingly caught up in the chaos. We grieve for America. And I know that many of you tuned in tonight to watch the interview with Scott Stabile. Scott is an amazing man and a voice for love, and I can't wait for you to get a chance to meet him. But as we talked this afternoon, he said to me, with everything that's going on in my city of Detroit and in the nation, I just don't have it in me to think about or focus on anything else. And so I've honored that. I really do honor that. And I've rescheduled Scott for the end of the month. And truly, this is not a time to look away. This is a time to look directly at the issues. And it begins with each of us looking deeply into our own hearts. There are so many voices of color speaking wisdom into the situation right now. And I think more than anything else, perhaps this is the one place to start, the important place to start. It's important for us to listen, to really listen. And fortunately, in our ultra-connected social media world, there are lots of places you can go and find those voices if you want to look. So rather than an interview tonight, I just want to leave you with a video from Eklund Mercy, who is an attorney from Atlanta, and she's going to read an excerpt from the book Black Like Me. I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and as far as I can recollect, I never saw racism modeled or heard racism verbalized. I grew up in a church that was integrated, and we didn't even know that word. We didn't even know that concept. It's just who we were. Sunday school class, they taught us to sing. Red and yellow, black and white, they're all precious in his sight. And I believe that because I saw that modeled in front of me. But we weren't that many hours from Detroit, and by the time that I began to watch the news and to comprehend some of the cultural ways that racism demonstrated itself, I remember being mystified by it. I read a book called Black Like Me when I was probably 14 or so, and it had a profound effect on me. If you've never read it or never read books like The New Jim Crow or Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates or Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, oh my God, what a book. I really encourage you, now more than ever, to pick up books like that and to open the ears of your heart and really, really listen. I'll also put a link in the comments to a reading list that was put together by Charis Books, and you might find something in that list that will be helpful. It's called Understanding and Dismantling Racism, a book list for white readers. I encourage you to open your heart, to read, to listen to other voices. I encourage you to read to your kids. Find books that are at your children's level that deal with issues of systemic racism, and read to your kids and model open friendships to them. Model a table in your house where red and yellow, black and white are all precious in His sight. Teach your kids tolerance. Teach your kids understanding. Teach your kids how to interact with people that are different from them, how to love people that are different from them, how to open their hearts to people that are different from them, whether that's different in color or different in religion or different in ethnicity or different in sexual identity, whatever it might be. Teach your children well. So, yeah. This is a time of great grief. Great grief. This is a time of no easy answers. This is not a time, I know more than anything else, this is not a time for white-splaining. We do not have to explain racism to people of color. They need to explain it to us. So, it's time for us to sit down, to listen, to really listen, to open the ears of our heart. Change can take place in America, but it begins with one. It begins with you and it begins with me. Here's Eklund Mercy reading Black Like Me.
Hello, this is Attorney Eklund Mercy, and this is your Mercy Moment. Today, I'm going to read an excerpt from one of my favorite books, Black Like Me by John Howard Griffin. It was published in 1960. Here is the summary. In the deep South of the 1950s, journalist John Howard Griffin decided to cross the color line. Using medication that darkened his skin to deep brown, he exchanged his privileged life as a Southern white man for the disenfranchised world of an unemployed black man. November 24th. No, sir. You're my first ride since Mobile. I learned he was a married man, 53 years old, father of a family now, grown, and a grandfather of 2 children. He was certainly, by the tone of his conversation, an active civic leader and a respected member of his community. I began to hope that I had encountered a decent white. You married? He asked. Yes, sir. Any kids? Yes, sir. 3. You got a pretty wife? Yes, sir. He waited a moment and then, with lightness, paternal amusement, she ever had it from a white man? I stared at my black hands, saw the gold wedding band, and mumbled something meaningless, hoping he would see my retinas. He overrode my feelings and the conversations grew more salacious. He told me how all of the white men in the region craved colored girls. He said he hired a lot of them for housework and in his business. And I guarantee you, I've had it in every one of them, before they even got on payroll. A pause. Silence above humming tires on the hot top road. What do you think of that? Surely, some refused. I suggested cautiously. Not if they want to eat or feed their kids, he snorted. If they don't put out, they don't get the job. I looked out the window to tall pine trees rising on either side of the highway. Their turpentine odor mingled with the soaked smells of the man's khaki hunting clothes. You think that's pretty terrible, don't you? He asked. I knew I should grin and say, why no, it's just nature, or something other disarming remark to avoid provoking him. Don't you? He insisted, pleasantly. I guess I do. Why, hell, everybody does it. Don't you know that? No, sir. Well, they sure as hell do. We figure we're doing you people a favor to get some white blood in your kids. The grotesque hypocrisy slapped me as it does all Negroes. It is worth remembering when the white man talks of the Negro's lack of sexual morality, or when he speaks with horror about mongrelization and with fervor about racial purity. Mongrelization is already a widespread reality in the South. It has been exclusively by the white man's contribution to the Southern way of life. His vast concern for racial purity obviously does not extend to all races. This aspect of Southern life does not hit the newspapers because, as my companion said, Alabama nigger women are good about that. They won't never go to the cops or tell on you. It was obvious what would happen if one of them tried it. As I feared it would, my lack of cooperation nettled the driver. He took my silence rightly for disapproval. Where you from? He asked. Texas. What you doing down here? Just traveling around, trying to find jobs. You're not down here to stir up no trouble, are you? Oh, God, no. You start stirring up these niggas, and we sure as hell know how to take care of you. I don't intend to. Do you know what we do to troublemakers down here? No, sir. We either ship them off to the pen or kill them. He spoke in a tone that sickened me. Casual, merciless. I looked at him. His decent blue eyes turned yellow. I knew that nothing could touch him to have mercy once he decided a Negro should be taught a lesson. The immensity of it terrified me. But it caught him up like a lust now. He entertained it, his voice unctuous with pleasure and cruelty. The highway stretched, deserted through swamp forests. He nodded toward the solid wall of brush flying past our windows. You can kill a nigga and toss him into the swamp, and no one will ever know what happened to him. Yes, sir. I forced myself to silence, forced myself to picture this man in his other roles. I saw him as he played with his grandchildren, as he stood up in church with open hymnal in hand, as he drank a cup of coffee in the morning before dressing and then shaved, and talked with his wife pleasantly about nothing as he visited with friends on the front porch Sunday afternoons. That was the man I had seen when I first got into the truck. The amiable, decent American, in all his features. This was the dark tangent in every man's belly. The sickness, the coldness, the mercilessness, the lust to cause pain or fear through self-power. Surely not even his wife or closest friends had ever seen him like this. It was a side he would show no one but his victims or those who connived with him. The rest, what he really must be as a husband, devoted father, and respected member of community, I had to supply with my imagination. He showed me the lowest, and I had to surmise the highest. His face was set hard in an attempt to regain his equilibrium. When he pulled off the main highway and stopped on a dirt road that led into the jungle, we had engaged in a subtle battle of which I think he had only then become aware. He needed to salvage from it something. This is where I turn off. I guess you want to stick to the highway. I thanked him for the ride and opened the door. Before I can get out, he spoke again. I'll tell you how it is here. We'll do business with you people. We'll sure as hell screw your women. Other than that, you're just completely off the record as far as we're concerned. And the quicker you people get that through your heads, the better off you'll be. Yes, sir. I stepped out and closed the door. He drove down the side road, scattering fine gravel behind his wheels. I listened until his truck was out of hearing distance. The heavy air of evening, putrid with swamp rot, smelled fragrant. I walked across the highway. I sat on my duffel and I waited for another car. None came.